selling officially at 15,500,000. Thank you for your patience, Natalie. It is history now. 15,500,000.
I left the receipt in the box in case you want to exchange it.
Wristwatch collecting refers to the hobby or practice of acquiring, curating, and appreciating wristwatches as collectible items. This activity involves enthusiasts, often referred to as collectors, who have a passion for acquiring watches of various brands, styles, and historical significance. Wristwatch collectors may focus on specific criteria such as vintage watches, luxury brands, limited editions, or watches with particular complications. The goal of wristwatch collecting is not only to amass a diverse and valuable collection, but also to appreciate the craftsmanship, design, and cultural significance of each timepiece. But why do we do what we do? Why did we pick wristwatches out of all the things to collect to be our main focus of attention? What have watches to offer, or which need do they satisfy for us as collectors? Do we all share one common personality trait, or is the only thing we have in common the things we wear on our wrists? Let's find out. Since watches haven't been around since only yesterday, people started to collect those from the moment they were introduced into society. Of course, it's hard to make out that one person who was the very first to collect, but since watches have started out as these very pricey and coveted devices, they were only available to wealthy people. And by the way, if you want to learn more about the history of a very specific type of historical watch, I recommend my video on the Ulysses Nardin Voyeur, which I will link for you down below. But back on topic, one of the first at that time, famous people who was really into collecting clocks and pocket watches was King Charles II of England, who died at the end of the Renaissance in 1685. In addition to his many other interests, the king was fascinated by clock mechanisms and had clocks distributed all around Whitehall, including 7 of them in his bedroom. Robert Bruce, a gentleman of the bedchamber, complained that the continual noise of the clocks chiming disturbed his sleep whenever it was necessary for him to stay close to the king. Also, Charles had a sundial installed in the privy garden by which he could set his personal pocket watch. And for a while, the king personally recorded the performance of the latest spring balance watch presented to him by Robert Hooke. Hooke was, and some are unsure about who was actually the very first, but let's say one of the first people to create the balance spring to be used in a pocket watch. It's also said that Charles II was more or less responsible for creating the need for pocket watches on chains instead of as pendants, because this little fashionista introduced waistcoats, so gentlemen needed to find a new way to store their pocket watches. Most ladies kept their watches as pendants up to the 20th century though. So as you can see, people with money were always very quick to become obsessed with watches and timekeeping, it seems. After Charles II, plenty of other watch enthusiasts followed, such as the Queen of Naples, who received the very first wristwatch from Louis Breguet in 1810, or you had Louis Cartier, who in 1847 started to revamp his watch business up until today, where you and me and thousands of others are now sitting here and think about why we do what we do, which now leads us to the following 3 findings. The first one is, since we have watches, watch collecting was a thing. The second one is, this includes all types of watches now. Of course, it started out as this ultra luxury, and it still partially is, but since watches luckily have developed over time, you can get watches starting at $10 that obviously still make you a collector. A watch is a watch. And lastly, watches are in what I like to call active collectible. Let's put Safe Queens and the super delicate vintage pieces aside. Watches are collected, but also worn for the most part. And so now that we kind of know where it all started and how we got here, we should next focus on what the general idea of watch collecting means for the individual person within that hobby. How does the act of collecting watches affect our identity, and why do we do it really? Caroline Murat, the Queen of Naples, who I talked about earlier, also happened to be Napoleon's younger sister. She was one of the first to wear a wristwatch designed by Breguet, but she also bought over 46 more watches and clocks from Breguet during her lifetime. Not all of them were intended for herself, but she also bought a couple of commercial watches to give, away as gifts. For her, watches weren't only something to collect for herself. It was also something she enjoyed giving away as gifts. She, and I'm sure others at that time too, saw the potential in watches, the potential to be more than just, private collectibles and, devices for timekeeping. Even, or probably especially at that time, watches were a showcase of status, being important or, rich enough to, be able to buy something as expensive as that. And, B, having the need to be aware of your time, not be dictated by the schedule of somebody else. And since, humans are still humans to this day, watches remain a symbol of status in today's world too. I mean, look at Ed Sheeran. At the end of his Divide tour, he worked with Tudor to produce a special edition Black Bay with the album's logo at 6 o'clock. He gave about, I think it was like 80 pieces to the cast and friends of the tour. It is also engraved on the case bag saying, "Thank you for all of your hard work on this tour. Love, Ed." I mean, he's obviously a watch person too. There's lots of videos on YouTube about him talking about his watches. But the message probably wouldn't have been the same if he had gifted something that was, less visibly precious and status laden as a wristwatch, which also leads us to the investment potential here. And I know some don't want to talk about that or, act like it doesn't affect their decision making when it comes to collecting. But I believe as long as you're not Ed Sheeran type of rich, it's definitely going to affect you in one way or the other, because what is attached to a status symbol is also its value and the representation of it. Watches can be tangible assets and a potential source of profit if, done correctly for some people. I mean, if you had bought a couple of Hulks back in, 2016, which I know for a fact that watch dealers had such a hard time getting rid of them, you would have almost tripled your value with them if you had sold them in 2020. I mean, things have already shifted by now, and I would say that only a few people are able to, let's say, handle or deal with watches that way and make a profit. But that doesn't negate the fact that many are still motivated by the simple truth that sometimes you can make money by collecting watches. And of course, those watches that could potentially make you a lot of money are usually, hard to get. So you're looking at rare watches that, when, worn out and about, are also guaranteed to get other watch enthusiasts' heads moving. So the approval of at least interest of others in the hobby in your watches is another big motivation that plays a part in why we do what we do here. So now that we know what draws us in, we cannot overlook the fact that there's also something very primal and less, how would you say that, less constructed about collecting watches. I'm pretty sure that one of the first things that come to your mind when I mention, Stone Age people and their behavior and how they survived is like this whole hunter-gatherer way of life. Hunting, gathering, or foraging is a common practice amongst most vertebrates that are omnivores, so humans. So this type of behavior comes very natural to us. Luckily, hunting and or foraging for food consists of going to your local grocery store and buy whatever you need right now. Long gone are the days where we had to spend all day looking for, a few bites to eat in order to survive. We eliminated the struggle, but the instinct remains, of course. So naturally, there is a shift, I would say. Since we no longer need to search hours for, a couple of berries, we seek that thrill of finding those precious berries elsewhere. Admittedly, this need for collecting or hunting isn't as strong in some as it is in others, maybe, but it still remains. And so it looks like we watch enthusiasts have picked wristwatches as our metaphorical berry, something precious and worth our time that, as we have now established, helps us not only to fulfill our need for self-identification, but also something to signal others our status within our social groups and society as a whole. A collector's mindset can take on many forms, and I wouldn't exclude the more casual ones from those very serious collectors who seek for very specific full sets and all that kind of stuff, because ultimately the desire to collect is there, but if and how you act upon it is a different story altogether, which leads me directly to the next point as to why we do what we do. How could I talk about collecting watches and not mention the appreciation for the technical aspects, the mastery in watchmaking and the entire craft in itself? There are, of course, no statistics on it, but I would guess that for most watch collectors, the initial interest in watches came from the simple, oh, nice, how does that work moment? That moment when we first saw a watch that sparked our interest. Perhaps you wanted to know why it was designed this way, or you wanted to understand how something so small can be so accurate, and, for many other reasons. There was that one thing that sparked your interest and started you on this journey. And for some, this might be slower than for others, but sooner or later you realize that you are in this rabbit hole and you're happy to be so. I mean, do you remember how it feels when you learn about a new mechanism or when you see a new release and you really like it? Whenever you find or learn something new, it can be, how would you say it, very intellectually stimulating and fulfilling. And of course, as humans, we seek that feeling over and over again. This is what keeps you diving deeper and deeper into a hobby. What makes you want to learn more so you understand it better, only in order to realize that you know nothing and the whole thing starts over again. Which is also why I said earlier that a watch enthusiast or a watch collector doesn't have to have 10 plus watches to be considered that. Sometimes it is also the collecting of knowledge about watches and, only owning one watch that obviously counts just as much. So the technical appreciation for the mastery and the watches and watchmaking itself plays a huge part in why we love to do what we do. As you can see, watch collecting and the psychology behind it is very diverse and many parts play a role in it. Some parts might be more important to someone than others, but it's the sum of everything that delivers the same results: an interest in watches. So, to answer my initial questions, we cannot pinpoint that one exact reason why we choose watches as a way to fulfill our need for self-identification, belonging, and the urge to hunt, gather, or collect. But it is a mixture of all of the reasons mentioned before, paired with our very first initial interest in a specific watch for, whatever reasons. What keeps us going is, as I said, the intellectual fulfillment we get from it, the feeling of belonging to a group, and the representation of a certain status within society, subconsciously or not. We join forums, clubs, social media groups, and share our passion with other, usually like-minded people. And this shared experience and the exchange of knowledge is fostering, I would say, an even stronger sense of belonging. And especially nowadays where human connection often suffers from, the impact of technology, this sense of belonging is worth so much more. The sense of purpose collecting can give someone, as well as this feeling of, accomplishment when you hit a goal, find something extremely rare, or finally understanding something extremely complex is truly incredible. It really explains why something as anachronistic as wristwatches keep on enduring. Even in this digital age, those mechanical little things haven't lost their appeal, and I doubt that this will change anytime soon. And this is all I have for you today. I hope this video did at least two things for you. One, help you to understand yourself as a collector or watch enthusiast a bit better, or someone who isn't that much into watches, help you to understand us as watch lovers a bit more. Either way, I really hope you have enjoyed this video. If you want to watch more essay type videos, I will link some of my favorites in the description box down below. If you have enjoyed this video, I recommend giving this a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more watch content like this. And then I will see you in my next one. Bye!